Welcome to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco, bringing you interviews with industry experts and regular folks who tested the job search waters and succeeded, and strategies to tell your story and land you job interviews in 60 days, guaranteed. Here's your host, Virginia Franco.
Hello, everyone. I have with me today global talent management strategist, coach, and trainer, Dorothy Dalton. She is the CEO of 3+ International and DDTM and works globally in talent management strategy, covering the whole spectrum from hire to retire in the talent pipeline. She's recruited, trained, and coached thousands of men and women in her career, working with renowned international companies and organizations. Her firm provides HR consulting to organizations that are looking to create diverse and inclusive workplaces, including gender balance, focus on bias-conscious talent sourcing, and retention. She is very heavily involved in HR and tech, and particularly with regards to potential changes to recruitment processes. And lastly, she is a keynote speaker, a trainer, an author, HR blogger. I know her from LinkedIn. So Dorothy, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very delighted to be here.
And especially because I'm in the U.S., Dorothy is in Belgium, so she is calling me in the evening, which I very much appreciate.
You're very welcome. I'm very happy to be here.
So you heard me give a quick overview of, you heard the bio that I used to introduce you. I'd love to hear from you if there's anything that I missed in terms of the services that you provide. And then I'd love to hear how you came to be the CEO of two different companies.
Basically, I've got two different HR consulting organizations. One that is gender neutral, and the other one which focuses primarily on the female talent pipeline. So I support organizations that are looking to bring in greater diversity and greater gender balance into their organizations, and also to help women achieve their potential.
What was it? It sounds like you're passionate about this. Tell me how you came to found these companies.
Well, my early career was in corporate HR, and I think like a lot of people who do this, and I had a period in European sales and marketing, and way back when, many years ago, I had an opportunity to go set up my own business and go into primarily executive search. So The main focus of my business is executive search, but from my early career, I was a coach and a trainer, and that sort of came back, I would say, at the height of the big financial crisis, when I
back in 2008.
2008. Yeah, and when a lot of people were looking for coaching, and it was only then that I added it to as a potential offering, and I came into the gender balance world basically when my daughter graduated from university, and I found that she was encountering 30 years after me exactly the same issues that I had in the workplace.
Really?
And sadly, yes. So that's how 3+ came into being. Was that I got involved with my daughter and her friends, and eventually it became a business. So and we're still not making the sort of progress I'd like to see, but that's a little bit of my history.
Wow. Well, I want to focus, given that you have this insight into gender biases and your work to try to achieve balance on that, I'd love to get your thoughts through the questions that we will discuss. You went through it 30 years ago, your daughter did, and now you've been coaching women across all industries, I imagine. What are a couple of the challenges that you see women facing that are making career change or trying to look for a job maybe for the first time in a while?
I think I think some of the challenges for women, I think particularly for those that have taken time out maybe to do a parenting gap, I think that can be very challenging for some women. I think a lot of women lose confidence in that period. And I think there have been a lot of changes that have taken place, as you know. And one of the hardest things is trying to understand, if you've taken even 4 or 5 years out or even less, that it's quite hard to keep up with the pace of change that we've seen in the job search market. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that most women, when I say they're blissfully unaware, I mean, in some ways it's a good thing, that they don't realize that the biases that they have to encounter when they're looking for a job. So it's quite interesting when I do workshops or I do keynotes or whatever it is, and we're talking about the challenges, the invisible challenges that women face, both, breaking into the workplace, staying in it, and then what happens if they take a break to have a family. So it's the workplace for a woman is very different experience to the workplace for a man.
It is for a man. Do you sense that when you say that women are blissfully unaware, or do you feel like that is occurring more for the women that have left, or even people that are currently in the workforce? They really don't recognize what they're going to be facing should they take a gap, or maybe it's even challenges of staying in the workforce.
I think it's like with everything. It's very nuanced. So it's a mix of both. So I mean, women don't understand, for example, how the research from the European Commission shows how women are judged by their appearance far more heavily than men are, and how priority is given to their flexibility and whether or not they have children. Whereas for men, it's attached to their qualifications and experience, which is completely the normal thing. That's exactly how it should be. So women have got a lot of double binds. And the other thing that they face is when they stand up for themselves and they try and make a correction, that they quite often have a backlash of, they're difficult, or they're emotional, or, they're aggressive. I mean, that's very common for women.
Yeah, so no, you're right. And those same qualities, when they come out in a man, are admired versus...
Yeah, the leadership qualities, right?
The leadership qualities, that's right.
So when women...
They're not viewed as leadership.
Then it's considered, to be not appropriate or not leadership material. So there's great research from Harvard Business Review on that, about the words that are used to describe women, for example, in performance reviews.
I know. Yep. No, I have studied that. Yeah, I have. It's very eye-opening. So do you teach women how to navigate those waters? Are you trying to empower them to fight back more? What would you say?
Well, what I try and do is both, right? And in the sense that I'm part of me is a realist, in the sense that women have to learn how to navigate. But the part of me is also focusing on trying to get workplaces to change and become more inclusive.
Right.
So I'm working on the two elements.
On both ends.
Yeah. And that's what we really need to be doing.
We do. No, you're right. I have 2 daughters. It's heartbreaking to think that we haven't moved the needle much. What do you find? Is there something that you find that just utterly shocks some of the clients that you're working with regards to this, or just job search in general?
I think it's one of those things that quite often women don't ask for help in job search. I don't know if it's the same in the States. I think in the States, you have a culture that is much more open to investing in professional services. So that's when I say that Europe is a step behind. This is one area where we are a step behind. So usually,
I would say probably half of my clients are women. That's interesting, but I don't, and that's anecdotal. I don't know if that's a cultural norm, or I'm lucky. I don't know.
I think in the States it's much more common. In Europe, women tend to seek help when they are desperate. when they're on burnout, or something terrible has happened. They're in a toxic workplace, or they have a difficult boss, or there is some major issue. That it is only then that they seek help.
Whereas absolute last, they're desperate for help.
Yeah. What happens in the States? It's much more routine, I think.
I think so. It never even occurred to me. I actually would have said that men are more reluctant to seek help for what I offer. I mean, I offer writing services. But, I'd say my clientele are about 50-50. I do see, some of the points that you brought up around, how people fight back and how people are judged by their parents, all of those things I definitely see. But in terms of people seeking help, I don't feel like I have seen a tendency one way or the other. I'd love to poll some people about that, though.
Yeah, I think, this is my experience, that women come when they're desperate, when, that's the point of they're really at the last resort. Whereas men,
their hair is on fire.
They're much more strategic about their career. They're planning, they're networking externally, and they tend to have a longer term vision. And certainly the work that 3Plus did in the MBA community, for example, showed there were differences between women not having a career strategy and men having a career strategy. And that was a clear differentiator between men and women. It's quite interesting.
That is interesting. I would. So, in your experience, women tend not to have a career strategy, or they do. Yeah, I could. Yeah, I concur with that. I consider myself an accidental entrepreneur. I don't know that I had any big plan, and I would probably say I'm not alone. So, what advice do you give women when they are looking to, it's one thing to look for a job. It's another thing to try to make a career change or a career move. Is there advice that you would give a woman as a job seeker that maybe is a little different than you do with your other clients, or just generally speaking, what would you say to them in terms of getting started?
I think my general advice is gender neutral. I think that everyone, if they're making a career pivot or a change or making a career decision, is that they have to look at their goals, their values, and their vision. I mean, what is important to them? What are their expectations? What are they looking for? And if they find that they're not spending time doing something that is not in line with their goals and their vision, that either their behavior has to change, their activities have to change, or their goals have to change. And I find that men and women equally, this is a gender neutral path. I think what happens in my experience is that women tend to factor in non-professional circumstances more heavily than men. That's my experience. So they will take into consideration family circumstances, what's going on with the kids, that their parents, other factors.
How does it work with the balance?
Yeah, and I mean, in my role as a headhunter, I would contact a man, for example, for maybe an international opportunity because I work internationally, and he would just say, "Yeah, I'm interested." Whereas a woman would say, "Yeah, I need to talk about that."
So your advice is, look at the long view, look at the goals, the visions, the expectations, see where there's a gap, and consider your change from there. It's interesting because I would say that the younger, now I work with all generations, but the younger generations than me, I'm a Gen X person, I would say millennials, I actually do hear more thought around the family as a component, a decision-making component for jobs. I'm tired of traveling. It's hard with my kids. They're still in grade school. They need me more. I don't know that I hear that as much. Well, I don't hear that as much with my older clients. Maybe it's because their children are older, but I definitely am seeing that more in more recent years than when I first started writing.
I think when my kids are millennials, right? So one of the things that we tend to forget is millennials are now having kids and they've got mortgages.
That's right.
So we tend to make this broad brush statement about millennials without actually looking at what they're doing. So I think, and that's quite interesting in terms of recruiting older workers, is that older workers actually tend, perhaps in some areas, to have less responsibilities than younger.
That's right. Yeah.
Workers. What I am seeing, and I'm loving this, and this is happening in Europe, I don't know if it's happening in the States, is that men equally want to spend more time with their families.
Well, and that is my observation, and they are taking their family, they're evaluating their life outside of work. Yeah. When making decisions around their professional lives. I love it too.
I find that I'm sitting back and watching it as a if you like, a sociological change, and it's quite interesting. And then you see older generations are freed up to work, antisocial hours, or to travel to strange places or do these things. And I think organizations should really tap into that. So I don't get why organizations have age bias. I just don't get it.
I don't either. It seems like there's so many positives to bringing on older people, and flexibility is one of them. You're right. They can absolutely jump from country to country, and they're willing to do it. I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, people that were baby boomers would have gone anyway, and then the family would have been miserable. But now people are men and women are taking it into account, the children and the family and all of that. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is what advice do you have for people that have been job searching and it is not going well? Because that's quite different than the person who is getting ready to embark on a job search. Do you have different advice to them to get started?
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is something that we both see a lot on LinkedIn. And I think that quite often, if someone hasn't looked for a job for maybe 4 or 5 years, then the pace of change that we're experiencing is so great that they are generally not familiar with how it works.
Yeah, they're lost.
Have you found that? And so that's where I would say that, if you can afford it, get some professional help, because job search is an art and a science, right? So the art is telling a compelling narrative, and you're a writer, so you know that. And then the science side is making sure that you're searchable and retrievable. So, and a lot of job seekers don't understand that, so they get it wrong. So I would say to any job seeker, keep meticulous records and really track your success and where you're going wrong. So, are you not getting called for interview? Are you not getting hits on your profile? Are you failing at the first screening, telephone or video? Are you maybe underperforming an interview? And really look at where you're maybe falling down and take
where the breaks are happening. And you're right. By keeping track, you can identify where the process is breaking.
Yeah. And some people, for example, if they haven't looked for a job, they don't have a LinkedIn profile. Well, you and I both know that that's not going to work today.
Right.
So it's about sometimes no news is news. It's new. It's the message that you've got to do something. So I would urge anybody who gets stuck with nothing, we call the cyber black hole, right? And to get professional help, because a lot of people who are coming to the job market, they haven't looked for a job for a while. They do what we call spray and pray. Do you have that expression?
Yep, same.
So, spray and pray.
Does not work.
It doesn't work. No, exactly.
I don't think I've ever heard it articulated quite that way, that job search is a true blend of art and science. Because you can have the most compelling narrative, but if you're not searchable, you're not retrievable, it's not going to work. And likewise, if you pop up on searches, but your story doesn't make any sense or it's not compelling, you won't get anywhere either. So it really does. That blend does need to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So my next question is one that I deal with all the time. And I'm sure you come across this. I end up trying to help people who they have a lot of different skills. They can go in a number of different directions, and they are so excited to test the waters and try. Well, I want to try this. I want to try that. I don't want to limit my options. How do you help position them, or how do you help them to manage that expectation?
I think one of the things that I do is I sit down and really work through what, I use the expression goals, values, and vision. What are your goals? What do you want from life? What are your strengths? What are your personal development needs? What are you looking for? And in my experience, I found that people actually don't have as many options as they think they do. And there will be certain practical elements that limit, like geography or the language skills. And in Europe, so I'm talking Europe, right?
Sure.
So because I'm based in Brussels, and you can go 200 kilometers in any direction, you need different languages. So there are things like language skills, the geography, where your kids are. Do you have to put them in a different education system? So all of these things. And mainly people have about 4 or 5 options. And I'm very much a plan A, B, and C kind of girl, but I think you should follow your dream. I think that, but I also think that you should have a plan B and C. And so I usually advise clients to research all options. And normally when they're researching and they're trying out, they will get different messages which give them clearer direction.
Clarity.
Yeah.
So if they have 4 or 5 options after you've helped to narrow it down, do you sort of have them go through and say, okay, the dream is plan A, and then B and C are the other options?
Yeah, and
okay.
look at them and see how they align with what you're looking for. Sometimes it might be they need to upskill, or they might have to move internationally, or they have to move geographically, or maybe they have to bring families with them. And I've been in situations where people have found their dream jobs, and then one of their teenagers won't move. And literally that there's been a lot of negotiation and compromise around that. So I think it's about keeping an open mind, exploring your options, and then making strategic decisions based on those.
Yeah. No, I love that. I laugh. My family moved from the U.S. to Mexico when I was a kid, and I made my parents' life a living hell, to the point where they did end up moving a year earlier than the assignment. I was so miserable, and I made them pay for it, which is not very. I was in middle. I was 12, going on 13.
Okay.
Not an ideal age to. Yeah, I was a brat about it, so I didn't want to move. So.
Well, and I think that raises an important point about, discussing with and factoring in family considerations, because, that you, and certainly if someone who's worked a lot in moving families around, that quite often an executive will succeed or not succeed based on how happy the family is. So we always have to have a saying like, keep the family happy, because if the family is happy, the executive will succeed.
Yes, no, that's absolutely right. Absolutely right. Case in point, my father. So, yeah. 3-year assignment cut in half. So we've talked a lot about gender bias throughout this when it comes to hiring practices. What advice do you have to a woman trying to select the right company, overcome those, identify those biases, overcome them? how should they approach it? You can't hide that you're a female the way you can hide your age, so.
I mean, there are two things. I think first of all is that companies need to get their acts together, and they're not doing that. And one of the things that's going to happen is, particularly as women are, all the research says that companies that have gender balanced teams are more effective. So companies that need to get that on board. So for women who are looking for opportunities, they should research their company. They should check to see if it has zero tolerance on sexual harassment, if it has, good benefits. I mean, in the States, obviously, you have very different situation to Europe, where we have much more advantageous circumstances related to maternity leave and so on.
But there are family-friendly benefits that favor females in certain companies that other ones don't.
Yeah, and I think if you're looking for flex, if you're looking for remote working, all of these things, that certainly there is a mood at the moment to companies to make sure that these are advertised up front, because generally women are reluctant to ask for them because they feel as though they're penalized, and they are penalized.
No, and women are not good at advocating for themselves.
Exactly.
I've learned that. So in terms of being a realist, do your homework, and there are ways to identify red flags or companies where it be a good environment.
Yeah, and all that information is out there. I mean, that's there are so many platforms that people can go to check where companies sit now on the inclusion spectrum, and particularly with Gen Y and the upcoming Gen Z, as you call it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these people are really switched on, and all the research says is that they will not stay in your company unless you try and accommodate them. So I think it's about finding the balance between self-advocating and companies being more flexible.
And do you recommend that women ask questions around the topic during interviews? Are there, people are scared to do that?
Well, I would advise companies to advertise their benefits, because that's a way of attracting people to their brand. So that's the first thing I would do. But for women themselves, I think that they should. I mean, there are two elements here. There's one that is a lifestyle choice based on this is what I want, but for other women, it's what they need. I mean, that they can't function without some of the benefits that companies can choose to offer.
Right. So
I think that if they can ask, and they can ask in a way that is less confrontational, but to ask, what is your position on, what benefits are you offering? But they have to be willing to withdraw if it doesn't work for them. And sometimes for women that's not easy, particularly if in your location the company might be the major employer, for example.
Right. No, the options might be limited.
So, but I think there are ways of finding out through informational interviews, through checking.
That is a very good point.
Checking on Twitter or social media, talking to people. So there are lots of ways to find out, I think.
That's true. That's a very good way to get intel. You're right. The informational interviews, you'll get things that you would not get from a company website. Make sure the company actually accurately lives what they say they do.
Exactly. And if a company doesn't state up front, I think you can assume that they may not offer. But you can also check on PayScale on Glassdoor. And so you can check. So I think it's about being savvy and doing your research.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think online research together with speaking to people in the trenches, you gather as much intelligence as you can to make those decisions, especially if that is working in a company that that is gender balance is, if that's a deal breaker for you, that you absolutely want, if that's critical, you've got to do the homework around it.
Yeah. And that's what I mean about narrowing choice. So if you might think you have unlimited options, but if one of your options is in a sector or a company that is not going to accommodate what you're looking for, then you need to rule them out.
It's not really a choice. That's true.
Exactly.
That's true. So if someone were to say to you, Dorothy, I have 5 minutes with you and I am getting ready to go off on my job hunt, one or two tools that I absolutely cannot live without, what would you say?
2, LinkedIn.
Okay.
Have a really good LinkedIn profile with a great photo and a nice professional headline, great summary and lovely success stories, not just a job description. So, and learning how to use that platform, it's fantastic for job seekers.
It is. It's a database and a place for conversation. And there's no other platform that gives you that. Yeah.
Exactly. Raise your visibility and, engage, make sure that you're searchable. This is something women don't do. Their profile is more incomplete than their male counterparts. They have less keywords, less skills listed. So ladies, you've got to work on that. And the other thing the other tool, I don't know, does this count as a tool? I would say to network.
That counts, yep.
Okay. So
shore up your network, yeah.
Yeah. So get out there, get into the workplace, not the workplace, but extend your network, because still a very high percentage of jobs introductions are made through referrals and networks. So, go to conferences, go to, some of these, not cocktails, but events, different things, and make sure that people know who you are. Raise your visibility.
What in Europe, and maybe it's country by country, but what percentage of roles would you say are sourced through referrals? I mean, in the U.S., they say it's as high as 60 to 80%.
Yeah, I think it's the same.
About the same.
Yeah, it's very, very high percentage of jobs go through who do you know, and I get asked all the time if I know someone. So it's same. And that's another thing for women is that ladies recommend another woman because quite often they don't. So really,
that's true. Be your own advocate. That's right. I agree with that. And to me, it's human nature that jobs get filled through who you know, because as a hiring manager, if I have a role that needs to be filled, my first instinct is not going to be, let me go to HR and fill out a job posting and then get it disseminated on LinkedIn. I'm going to say, who do I know? And guys, who do you know that can fill this role? So I think they just happen in tandem a lot, and it's quicker to talk to people than to go through the process of getting the posting up and writing it and all of that.
The downside of that is you don't get diverse listings.
You don't. Nope, you don't.
You get mini-me's. So, so that's something that you have to factor in, is that if you have a diverse network, then you can have a diverse referral intake. But most people tend to network with people like themselves. So I think it's great, but it is a contributing factor to non-diverse shortlists, for example.
I agree. And I would say then, to a caveat to your number 2 tool, network, do what you can to make your network diverse.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I love that. Okay, my last question, and I'll let you be done for the evening. My favorite question. What is next for you? What can we expect in the rest of 2019 or 2020 for you?
Well, I'm still working all the time to increase gender balance shortlists. That's always at the top of my list and working on that. But I'm involved in writing a booklet for the European Union on how to deal with sexism and sexual harassment. So that's something that will come out at the end of the year. And I'm also working on an inclusive workplace booklet for an organization based locally in Belgium. So they're my two big projects.
Wow. Now, the book that you're writing, will that be available for anyone to purchase?
Well, it's not going to be for purchase. It will be distributed within the European Union, but I think it will be around and it will be free. So I think it's commissioned by the European Union. So
wow. That's wonderful. Thank you. I would love that. Perfect. Well, Dorothy, thank you so much. You've got my wheel spinning about how to better coach my female clients. So thank you so much.
No, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to Resume Storyteller with Virginia Franco. To learn more about storytelling strategies to catch the eye of today's SKIM online readers, hiring and decision makers, go to www.virginiafrancoresumes.com.